Hello, everyone. Pierce here from Licensed Folk. With today's event is a postponement of last month's, and we're looking at mainframe pricing. It's going to be short and simple because I want to make sure that we're covering that this is functional and approachable and useful. And the tips I'm about to share with you are literally coming from hot off the press, so to speak, from the various mainframe contract negotiations we've been involved in the last, 6 to 12 months. And there has been a lot going on with the Z16, Z17 upgrade cycle now midway through. Many of you have already received your offers and would be negotiating the hardware, the software, both with IBM and less so with Kindle, of course. And I'm wondering, is there anything we can do to improve things? So with License Hook and our team here, first of all, we are IBM licensing and mainframe contract experts. We've done about 15 of these mainframe deals in as many months. There's pretty much there's one every month for us, and last quarter was particularly busy. I say last quarter. We're in Q2 at the moment, but let's be honest, most of the deals have been done as of yesterday or last week, as most end of quarter deals need to be. Without further ado, let's jump into the content, shall we? Switching back on IBM's pricing. So today, it's a very short agenda, really. We're just going to have a quick look at what we mean by contract optimization, have a look at some tips, and then if we have a little bit of time, some Q&A. And for those of you who are going to be watching this on demand, don't worry. You can follow up with questions on the LinkedIn channel anytime after this event or during this. I will answer them all. And if it's a sensitive topic, message me directly. And if you're happy for the world to see the answer, just put it out on the event channel for chat, and I will answer it as best I can. So jumping in, contract optimization. What I wanted to explain what we're talking about here really is that there's sort of there's a number of parts when it comes to getting value from any agreement. And when it comes to mainframe, you have obviously optimizing your MIPS consumption, you can have the technical architecture. We look very much at the contract optimization. And despite what IBM, Kindle, and anybody else who are selling you the mainframe would have you believe, there is a lot you can do to optimize your deal and to get better value, to pay less, to get better terms and conditions. And really what this presentation here today is going to cover a lot of that. It's going to basically give you, food for thought. So in contract optimization, what we're really looking at is, are you buying the right products? Are you buying it at the right price? Are you getting the right contractual terms? And in particular, are you paying a fair price as the rest of the market in your region is concerned? But also, critically important is flexibility in the future, making sure you buy that in the early stages of any agreements. We'll talk about that in a little more detail as we get into the tips. So contract optimization, as opposed to technical optimization, is about doing that deal on both with IBM, which is now probably all the direct hardware and software is bought with them, but on the managed services as well, probably predominantly with Kindle, but there are many others providing managed services now that market has loosened up a little bit. So focusing on the terms, conditions, are you buying the right thing, the right price? Are you getting the right protections going forward? And what happens if you get your calculations wrong? Have you got flexibility in the future? So let's dive in, shall we? So first of all, we look at I thought I'd summarize the tips on one screen here rather than just dumping lots of slides at you. So they're all here. I'm going to talk about each of them. There's probably 16 more of them beyond this. I'm just kicked out the most. Some of them are most relevant. Some of them are actually probably more timely. These are just the ones that hit me in the head in the last 2 months. And I thought, hey, why not talk about that particular one in today's webinar? Keep in mind, there are many opportunities to optimize and get a better deal. And when it comes to mainframe deals, these are $50, $100 million deals over 3 years. So anything you can use to shave off a percent here, a percent there is worth millions to you. And that's the way to think about these savings and negotiations, that small tweaks can be worth millions to you now and can be worth millions to you in the future in terms of cost avoidance, risk management, just straight out savings. So number one on the list here is prepare for an early renewal. This is probably the number one tip I give to any of my clients. You may know this already, you may know it in principle, but I cannot overemphasize how important preparing for an early renewal of your mainframe deal is. What do I mean by this? An early renewal, also affectionately called a pull forward, essentially is where you have set up the terms. And let's take an example. Your ELA renewal is December 2026. So it's coming up in 6 months' time. Now, or maybe let's make it easier for myself. Let's say your ELA renewal is 30th of March 2027. What would happen if you were to have prepared for that renewal in December? This brings a whole host of advantages to you. First thing is, if you can bring a deal to an IBM account manager early, that is instantly worth a few points off the deal. Just by turning up early, you will be able to negotiate much harder. Why? Because it's not in that account manager's pipeline yet. You know this for next quarter, but if you can bring it forward, it is in their interest. First of all, this year, just getting mainframe deals in December 2026, there's a lot of pressure on to get it in. And if you can bring it in, straight away you have a negotiation. But the fact that you can actually say no to an offer coming from IBM at that moment, if you don't like it, is tremendous leverage. So if you don't like the deal in December, then you can yourself, let's just reset this and have a conversation in March about it, or in February about it. Now, of course, the account manager will tell you about the discounts and why it's such an advantage right now. But the strength of an early renewal is ultimately down to a simple thing. You can walk away from that offer right now because you had a second chance at it. And guess what? Here's another little tip for you in the same vein. What if you were to be prepared 2 quarters early? In other words, you can present the deal early. IBM don't come back to you. Maybe you yourself are not even ready for it yet. Next time you get 2 more shots at it. This is fantastic leverage. You get to clarify things, prepare internally. IBM get hungrier and hungrier. They now see that potentially an early renewal is on the cards. So now they're incentivized and pumped up. And you retain that magical golden ticket, which is, I don't have to buy right now, which is the number one piece of leverage you have in mainframe negotiations. Okay, so that's my number one tip. If nothing else, do that one. But let's move on to the other ones. Now, by the way, these are not in order of impact. They're in order of, as I said, they're the ones that hit this quarter with most high impact, and that came to mind. The next one is the not to exceed clauses in your contract. And most procurement professionals, which I imagine many of you are right now, are used to having some sort of price fixing not to exceed clause. In the world of mainframe, this is critically important because, again, it's about having that option to walk away in the future if you're not happy with the deal, or at least have some sort of an idea of what the worst case deal looks like. Not to exceed clauses are they're included in, are asked for by a lot of procurement people, but they're actually rarely scrutinized. They take the default number presented. So what I would be saying to you is, first of all, you have multiple locations around your agreement when it comes to mainframe, on the hardware side, software side, on the individual components within the deal, to look for not to exceed clauses to be included. These are ultimately protections against, spikes in costs later on in the years that follow on. But also, there's something else subtle about them. They're very often used as the baseline for which the next renewal will be based on. So in other words, they know that they'll get at least the not to exceed cost. So if you set those not to exceed clauses much lower, and I mean negotiate hard, they're an easy concession for an account manager to give because they're never really seen as something that's truly going to be executed on. But will provide you with protections going forward and will establish the ground or the baseline from which negotiations will start next time around. Also, when it comes to not to exceed clauses, very often it can be focused on just one aspect, price limits or something like that. But very often you can actually get not to exceed clauses among broader elements, other elements within the mainframe contract, be it hardware or software. And going into that level of granularity is worth it. It's a negotiation worth having and a protection worth getting. So look for not to exceed and negotiate hard on them. Don't just take the default value. Okay? And also make sure they're documented. Whatever is talked about does not matter unless it's in the final agreement. So that's the not to exceed clauses. There's a lot more to that, but we'll double click on that if we ever get into a conversation. Future purchase options. Now, this one It should be in every mainframe deal you do, but it's not always thought about. It sometimes gets forgotten. Or sometimes the table is added and on the appendix, but actually the values in them are pretty pathetic. So future purchase options essentially is what happens if I need more? And there's a few things you can do around here. First of all, you'll be given very often a default answer. Oh yeah, there it is. That's what's going to cost. And it's in terms of price per MIP and it looks like a reasonable deal. Very often though, the default offer from IBM is poor. It is very much worth it to negotiate hard to get much better rate on your future purchase options in case you run over. It also gives you that little bit of comfort that maybe you can say a little closer to the wind. Maybe you can try and negotiate a smaller deal, go a tier lower on the current agreement, knowing that you know how bad it will be if you get the calculation wrong. Not looking at this, not having a future purchase option at all, creates a huge risk because now you've got a situation where there's no cap really on. You're basically going to be taking this price. So that's a very significant concession. Now, there's a secret option built in here, which if you talk to the likes of us, we can share with you. And I'll share with the audience today. Sometimes you can even change the metric. So you're doing your tailor fit pricing and you don't like the FPE that's being offered. You can try and look for a change in the metric as well. It needs to be negotiated. It will never be offered, but you can get it if you come in strong. Go back to point one about preparing for an ELA renewal. That's the kind of concessions you can be getting. So future purchase options, having those clauses in, negotiating hard and modeling out what those look like, and saying to yourself, what would it look like if we go over? Maybe have a look at the PATs or look at your history over the last 3 or 6 years and see, are you exceeding or are you unsure? Critically important. Next up, we look at CPU capacity. And why this is so important for you is that when it comes to the DR type capacities, it's sometimes neglected because they're using in different time frames. Your CPU capacity can also make sure you stretch it out 5 years, give yourself lots of capacity, and do not try and co-term it with your current agreement. Go way beyond that. Why is this so important? Because it leads into another bit of flexibility you get. First of all, having capacity, you don't want to be having to buy that. It's extremely expensive if you have to buy extra capacity mid-term or later. But also, you get now the option to, with that extra DR capacity, you can actually possibly stretch out the life of your server because you have the DR capacity, you have the years going out, 2, 3, 5 years beyond if you, in some cases. That flexibility means you might even be able to skip a generation when it comes to a mainframe upgrade. This is incredibly useful leverage to have later if you don't want to fall into the modernization cycle. You might be on your Z16 right now. You're thinking of going 17. In the back of your head, there you go. What would it look like if we skipped one straight to Z18s? Now you're asking yourself, can we even do that? And CPU capacity is critically important as part of that. So that's why what I'd say to you today is check your dates. If you're negotiating a deal, make sure you put plenty of the capacity in and that the dates are well out into the future. Multiple years required here to give you that future capacity. Point 5, model your mainframe contract. Now, most modern procurement teams will have already done something like this. They'll have their spreadsheets built out and they'll be modeling out to a certain extent. What I'm saying to you here, and this is the type of service we provide, there is about 20 to 30 elements that make up any mainframe contract from a hardware and software perspective. You should be able to model out the consumption and the price, or estimate it as close as you can for each of those items. This is invaluable insights to be able to have when it comes to negotiation. The default quote you're going to get from IBM is going to contain probably 3 lines and on a PowerPoint presentation, and you'll rarely get a spreadsheet. And or if you do, it'll be 3 lines on a spreadsheet. By going into the diligence of building out, and this is where the heavy lifting comes on from a perspective, getting and building that model, getting the inputs from your technical teams, from your business teams, and working out all the elements that you think could impact your mainframe costs. And it's not just going to be down to NIPS consumption. It's not going to be down to the hardware, the refresh cycle. There's going to be many other things. You're going to be talking about support agreements. You're going to be talking about the communications, the upgrade options, the spec of the drawers. There's so many items that are all knobs and that can adjust the price of your mainframe contract, both on hardware and software, that you need to be modeling out and at least asking the question, what is the impact of changing this? And because of mainframe pricing not being linear, you've got your arcs and your rooks, you have curves which you must plot out against. A small tweak in one place can significantly change the overall cost elsewhere. That's why you need to model it out. And if you don't know how to model it out, or your technical team are struggling on this, get help, because this alone will help you to model out the true costs, but also the scenarios. There's going to be the as-is situation. There's going to be, if we have 3, 5, 7% growth, what's happening? There's always the one from your CIO or CFO saying, we want to reduce costs. And you want to be able to model that out correctly, because sometimes it's not just going to be a straight, reduce our MIPS consumption. You might find that's not going to bring the targeted savings that the CFO wants. And you have to look at all of the elements. So building that model and having that as an ongoing living document almost, that will be over the year, even 2 years, can be hugely valuable to you. 6th point might seem like stating the obvious. You're going to need to get advice here. As I mentioned at the top of the call here, we do one of these every month. In fact, there's probably 3 of them running right now for us with different companies. There's going to be other people who provide this advice, clearly not as good as us. That's just me talking. But you're going to need advice here. And the reason for it is multitude. First of all, your team are only going to be negotiating this every 3 to 5 years. Chances are the previous mainframe team aren't even there. They've either retired out or they've got moved on or whatever it might be. So just having the team that's going to be going up against the mainframe negotiators who are experts. They are the best deal makers on the planet. So you need to be well prepared, getting advice from whatever source it might be. You can get it from the different advisors, data advisors, the specialists, or the likes of us here who specialize in mainframe contract advice. Either way, get the advice. And maybe you won't get it all in one place. Maybe you just bring in a procurement specialist team. Maybe you bring in a team who can help you and figure out your hardware requirements, your backup requirements. Maybe a team of competing quotes for the different services, such as managed services and so forth. Either way, get advice. You're going to need it. You're talking about multi-million-dollar bets you're putting down here, and you need to have a little bit of help on that. Not the least of which, you need to be able to turn to your CFO and say, yeah, we got some advice on this. We know it's a good deal. Point here, this one popped up. It came up recently on a client where IBM came in the door and they suggested, hey, why don't you change your metric? The client in question, they had some VUE, they were on a tailor-fit pricing, and suddenly there was a suggestion that maybe a change in metric is needed here. And they were modeling it out and showing you what's going on. And here's the thing. When IBM come with a metric change for anything, be it on the distributed side, be it on the mainframe side, it is rarely to your advantage unless you have carefully considered it and model it out. There are times when it might be useful, particularly if you have a piece of insight in the business that they don't, such as an acquisition or divestiture or a significant drop in consumption expected over the next number of years. But for the most part, you must be beware of any time a proposed change in a pricing metric or pricing of any sort is being proposed by IBM. You need to evaluate it and be really careful before making those changes. As I said, it is rarely to your advantage if it's being proposed to you. Now, apart from the spelling mistake on the slide here, plan for 5, not 3 years. This might seem obvious, but you actually need to take a much longer time frame when it comes to $100 million negotiations like this. At least 5 years. Understanding where you are now, where you are in the next 5 years, and then planning there. The kind of things you might be thinking about here is, for example, you might be thinking about skipping an upgrade. You might be happily sitting and negotiating a fantastic Z17 upgrade. You have the CPU capacity, you have the not to exceed clauses, you have a really strong agreement here. In your mind, you might be saying, could I skip? And maybe go straight to whatever the version is. You're sitting on a 16, you might want to go to an 18. You might want to sit on the 17 you might want to delay the 18 modernization to as late as possible, and maybe not inside in your ELA term. You need to be thinking that out and asking the question, could I skip modernization cycle? Difficult, but not impossible. And also, taking a long-term view on it is you might start to structure the deal now, knowing that you're going to significantly change it in 5 years' time on the next renewal. In other words, lay down the foundation. This is a very useful where it's sometimes neglected in terms of negotiating strategy, where the focus is very much on the current deal and the current cycle. But if you take a two ELA renewal cycle on it, you can start to lay down foundations like all of the clauses I mentioned, the capacity planning and so forth now, with a view that in not this term, but in the next renewal, you're going to make the big changes, but you want to make sure you've established your foundations now. A very good scenario this applies to is, for example, if you're moving workloads away, and you have very serious plans to move workloads away from mainframe, but we all know it's going to take 2 or 3 years to do that. So you start to lay down foundation now. You make sure that you don't have constraints that if you do significantly drop, or you do wish to make a significant change in your infrastructure, your managed service, your hardware, that the changes will be valid in 5 years' time, not just 3. So with all those first set of tips for you, hopefully you found something interesting in here. As I said, there's many more of them that come up in our negotiations. These are the ones that were hot off the press in the last quarter, and I thought I'd share them with you. If you found these useful, I would love to hear back. Just give me a thumbs up if you found them any use. An email going, this looks good, is also fantastic. Questions, comments, I'm open to them all. Now, because I don't have in real time, but I will answer them in a follow-up after this. So any questions you put into the LinkedIn chat, I'll answer them. And as I said, in some cases, I will answer them privately if they're a sensitive topic. You just put in there, hey, Pierce, I got a more interesting question. Can you message me? I'll be there. And if you want more information on this, first of all, I'm available for a chat. No commitment. Just drop me a note. We'll have a conversation about it. It could be interesting. Second part here is go to our website and just bang in the word in the search box up the top, mainframe, and you will get a load of articles, webinars, all of the different things that will be around mainframe will be listed there. And of course, follow us on LinkedIn, the License Hawk page. We literally on a weekly basis put out tips for reducing IBM costs, be they mainframe, distributed, Red Hat, whatever. If it's mainframe, if it's IBM related, we'll be putting out posts on reducing costs. So I hope you found this webinar useful. I was excited giving it to you. And I look forward to hearing you. First of all, see your questions and looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you and talk soon.